All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Secular Hangouts. This is David, also known as the Graceful Atheist. And my colleague over here is, I'll let him introduce himself.
And I am Chris, also known as Godless Journey. I don't have my hat today.
So we've been gone, MIA, for a few weeks here as we both had personal things going on. I was out of town, lots of other things just happening. So I apologize for taking so long to get back on the air here. But today I think we've got a really interesting topic to discuss. I've got a blog post out there called Magic Feathers and Sugar Pills. And it kind of picks up where we left off a few weeks ago, talking about the placebo effect of religion. And the basic premise is that there are some effects that give hope or positive feelings or what have you for people that are in religion, and even though the source of what they think is the cause, a god, a deity, isn't actually true, it doesn't take away from the fact that can actually, for some people, some of the time, be helpful. And so I think last time we talked, the really obvious example is prayer. So when things happen to you and it's maybe difficult, maybe traumatic, prayer feels like you're doing something. Like, the moment in which you are in the least amount of control, it feels like you have something to control by praying. And so after the deconversion process, that actually can be very difficult when you start to realize that there actually isn't anything to that. So another example might be, I think a few other people had examples like the false hope, that realizing after they called out to God that, they thought God would respond and he didn't, that they were devastated at that point. So there's lots of examples, but I wanted to just throw it over to Chris. Chris, one of yours that you told me offline what had to do with your dad. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share that with us.
Sure, yeah. I remember growing up, my dad is a Marine, so he's got that very tough love mentality, and that's kind of the environment I grew up in. My parents got divorced. He found his second wife / my stepmother. She had been going to church, and she kind of brought us with her. And slowly throughout the years, my dad has become a very different person than he was when I was growing up. Definitely in a better way. He's more attuned to emotions, not just suck it up. He's gentler, kinder. He's a nicer person, in my opinion, than he was when I was, 10 years old. So, and I definitely attribute that to his reading and interpretation of the Bible being what you're supposed to be as a human, as opposed to what he knew before that as a Marine, that a man is supposed to be blah, blah, blah.
Right. Yeah. And just so we're 100% clear here, I am in no way saying that a deity, that God has done any of these positive effects. But if you take a person off the street, say they are a drug addict or what have you, and they have kind of no moral system of any kind, and all of a sudden you put them in the church, you give them a lot of friends, you give them people who care about them, who call them up and say, how are you doing? And suddenly that person can maybe get clean and sober, and they're going to attribute that to God. But the argument that I'm making is a very humanist one, right? That it's actually the people in our lives that have this impact. So is it going to church? Do you go to church because of something ineffable, or do you go to church because your friend Jerry from down the block goes?
Yeah.
And you're going to get to hang out, you're going to go to the potluck, and you're going to play on softball team or go to the knitting circle or, whatever, right? Like it's the people that actually make the difference. It's the relationships in our lives that actually is the positive effect. And to be clear, just considering or evaluating a moral system, putting yourself, deciding that you're going to live by a certain set of standards is always going to have some positive effects, right? Especially if you had none before that kind of thing. So,
yeah, I completely agree. Unless your moral standards come from like the KKK, then you might be a little off on that.
True.
But,
always exceptions to this rule.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'll just briefly tell quickly my story that's in the blog post. But for me, my mom did have a drug problem, had an alcohol problem, up until the point where I was a teenager. And one day she comes to me and she says, Jesus told me to quit drinking. And I was like, right. Like, I could not have been more cynical about that particular conversation. And I was like, fine, Mom, that's great. But she didn't drink that day, and she didn't drink the next day, and she didn't drink the next day. She wound up going to rehab. She came back, kind of a different person, right? Like, I watched this person transform in a very short period of time. And of course, she was accrediting God to this. So the point I want to make is here, there was real transformation, just like your dad. There was a real change, and nothing about my deconversion now takes away from the realness of that change at that time. But anyway, the story is not about my mom, it's about me. So I was kind of the good kid. So when Mom finally started to act like an adult, I completely fell apart. And every little thing was just building anxiety for me. Particularly, I can remember specifically a project where I had to get up in front of the class and talk about civics or something. I don't know. And I was just panicked about it, right? Like the thought of doing that was just absolutely killing me. And long story short, I eventually just pulled the plug and dropped out of high school. So the reason, the premise of this blog post was that the rest of the story is interesting, right? I kind of poked around at junior college, and I got a GED, and but I still had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I was, trying to become an adult, dirt poor, no prospects, no education, no idea what I was going to do next. So that's the setup. So then, my mom was very gentle about her experience, but she did hand me a Bible and say, this was what changed my life. Right. And you might want to look into it. So I did. I read the Bible. I read the whole thing. And I read the whole thing before I stepped foot into a church. But obviously the story is I became a Christian, went to church for the first time, was very confused about why they thought and did the things they did and thought.
Yeah, it could be
to have no relation experience. To what I did. Yeah. But they had no idea what to do with me. The youth pastor was there. He was like, why don't you come help? And come to find out that not everybody had read their Bible, so I actually had something significant to contribute. But here's the crux of it, right? So one day I'm hanging out with the youth pastor, and he says to me, you should go to Bible college. And why that's significant is I had really had no one, even my family really, who had said, you could make it, you could go to college, you could do it, right? So I just really thought, hey, I'm a high school dropout. There's no way I can't, I just thought it was an impossible thing. And something about this person who cared about me telling me that I could do this thing was all that I needed. Right. And the dominoes started to fall. I went to Bible college. I met my future and now current wife, and many, many, many good things resulted from that. And I point out in the blog post, of course, there's more to that story, right? Like the whole reason, about deconversion, the whole purpose of the blog post or the blog, and the whole purpose of what you and I are doing here is that there's more to the story. In that, I came to understand that and I use the analogy of the magic feather, that the magic feather wasn't magic, that there is no God, right? But the point is that all those positive effects still were real to me, and still I'm very, very grateful for them, even though I now don't accredit God with those things, right? And go ahead.
I wonder though, just for argument's sake, if he hadn't said Bible college and had told you become a teacher, would that have had the same effect on you at that point?
I think so. I think so. I had a lot of confidence about teaching the Bible because I had read through it and because he had given me the opportunity to teach and that kind of thing. So it was pretty specific there. But yes, I do think had I gone to a secular college, that hope still, that push, that nudge would have been great. Mm-hmm. Now I wouldn't have met my wife, right? I wouldn't have my kid,
sure.
And so that's what I mean with hindsight. I almost would make the same decision again because of some of those things, right? Mm-hmm. Even knowing what I know now. And the reason I wrote this whole thing was not to say you should go to Bible college. Not to say that religion is good. I think there's much more that is bad about it than is good, right? However, if you're a person that's in the process of deconverting, you don't have to throw away everything that was good in your life because it had something to do with religion. That is kind of my main point.
Yeah.
And then a secondary point is the one that I think maybe we can get Chris and I to actually argue about. Is I make an argument in the blog post, and actually, first let me just set it up. So Chris, a while back on Twitter, asked me, is it possible to be a humanist and an anti-theist? And my response was, that's a great question. And that actually changed the way I wrote this particular blog post. So before I tell you what I think, what were you thinking when you asked the question? What is the answer that you would give? And why is that important to you, one way or the other?
Well, for me, I'm still kind of fleshing out some of the ideas on both sides of that. I'm not necessarily that they're a dichotomy, but
yeah,
I see religion as harmful to society in its dogma, in its in a lot of the things that it does. So in that sense, it seems to be compatible with humanism in that you're trying to promote human flourishing.
Mm-hmm.
The way some anti-theists go about it, though, is probably not exactly the best way to do it. You can, I'm trying to express it in words, you can be against an ideal and not have it come back down on the person who holds that ideal.
Right.
And that, I think, is a good way to go about it. That's kind of my initial thoughts.
Yeah. I'll just say straight up, from the get-go, that it would be ludicrous to say that they're, completely mutually incompatible. right. And the position that I hold is nuanced, right? So it's I want to make sure that people, if you're hearing me, that I agree that we need to argue against bad ideas. And I put in the post, sometimes in public. Mm-hmm. And I've written another blog post called Why I Am Not an Anti-Theist. And I start that blog post by saying, thank you, basically, to the new atheists and the angry atheists, aggressive atheists, because they've provided cover for me. So I'm acknowledging all of that, right? And I'm acknowledging that secular humanism, which is the brunt of it, is, of course, committed to a natural point of view, right? A naturalistic point of view without the supernatural at all. So obviously that cuts out the God to begin with. The point, though, that I do want to get to is that for me, part of my humanism is about caring and loving for people. And this is important to me in that I realize when I look back on even that 17, 18-year-old kid and through my Christian life, I was always a humanist. In fact, I was railing against the constraints of Christianity because it wouldn't allow me to be a full humanist, right? In that, like you had to, how you treated, people in the LGBT community, the perspective on women, just a series of things that were anti-humanist, and those were the things I was frustrated with, and I didn't have the language back then or the understanding at the time. Yeah. But now looking back, I think, really my morality has basically stayed the same. even through Christianity, post-Christianity, I'm just freer to express that now, right? And so the main thing for me, the piece of work that I think we're doing here that drives me is for people to be able to talk to people who are in the process of deconverting, either thinking about it, in the middle of it, or just after it. And to say, you know what, the relationships in our lives are really important, including the believers in our lives. And there's a tendency, I think, when we first give up God, to kind of the initial thing that happens is you all the anger wells up in you. And this is a supernatural and normal thing to happen. Yeah. And you want to blame someone, something, and so the easy target is, going online, finding the random theist and just unloading on them. Yeah. And I am definitely saying I have done that, right? Like I've done it to good friends, in person, in front of them. I've done it online. And what I'm trying to say is, maybe learn from my mistake. In that there's a difference. This is the nuance. There's a difference between arguing about bad ideas and arguing about bad ideas which are held by an individual whose identity is tied up in those ideas. And so we ought to treat those people, believers, especially believers in our lives we care about, with great care. And that's kind of the brunt of my argument, right?
I think it's hard to separate that, though. Anyone who's going to have a belief in something, it's tied to their identity, regardless of what that belief might be. Mm-hmm. So to be against their bad idea is to be against that belief, and that's going to ruffle feathers no matter how much you put the kid gloves on.
Yeah.
So how do you take apart that that bad belief, but still leave the relationship?
Yeah, I mean that's it, right? Like that is the hard part. I guess my point is, priority-wise, especially with people in my life, my priority is to keep the relationship healthy, and secondarily is maybe lead them out of something that I think is destructive for them, right? And those things are in tension. Sometimes one will be over the other, right? But at the end of the day, to be loving to the people in my life who are believers is more important than correcting them. Now, this is what I'll say, and if my family ever watches this in the future, I'm sorry. I am subversive as all get out, right? I'm teaching, I'll actively talk about critical thinking and on safe subjects, like ironically, in this case, safe subjects, politics, right? Things that I agree with the people around me, and talk about the need for critical thinking when we look at political points of view, right? So I'm constantly talking about all the precursors that lead up to deconversion without directly attacking their belief, right? And
Sure.
my very existence that I'm an open atheist amongst them, and I'm not going out and pillaging and murdering.
Eating your babies weekly.
Yeah, and I'm trying to be caring and loving to my friends and family.
Mhm.
All of that is subversive. All of that is communicating very loudly against whatever their preconceived ideas are about atheists, about humanists, what have you. And that I've got to believe, must lead them to ask harder questions, right? Inside, so to speak.
Sure. But like you said, with politics, I mean, people's identities are tied to that as well. How do you distinguish which topics are on the table, which ones are off the table?
So again, I was using that as an example of when you happen to agree on a subject, just as an example of why we need critical thinking. But I also have family who are diametrically opposed to me politically, and it's the same thing. I love them more than my ideological purity to my political point of view.
Okay,
right? And so they know I disagree with them, and when the opportunity comes, and this is the last point I think I haven't made very well. When the subject comes up, whether it's politics or religion, then that's the opportunity. When the believers in our lives start to ask questions, that's the opportunity to talk, right, and to actually take harder stances. It's when they are kind of unsuspecting, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
And didn't ask for it, right? They are not, right? They, you know what I'm saying? Like when you come at them with, "You're wrong," of course they're going to be defensive, right?
Sure,
what do we expect they're going to? And the same thing online, right? So random stranger on Twitter, if you come at them hot with, "You're a fool, you're ignorant, you're stupid," of course they're going to be defensive, right? What did you expect to happen? That's what I'm saying. Now, if someone comes, including a random theist online, comes at you with a question, answer it, answer it truthfully and with conviction and with the strength of the evidence that you have, right? So I'm not saying hold that back. I'm saying, again, when we have the people in our lives who are not ready for that yet and really aren't asking those questions because they are still self-protecting, that coming at them with the insinuating that the thing that holds them together is a lie isn't going to be helpful, right, for anyone involved.
Sure. What do you think about other avenues of discussion rather than come out attack, like straight epistemology, for example, where you're not coming at them with facts or accusations or anything like that, but you're asking them questions to make them reconsider their own position.
So again, right, like if the friend or family member, and again, I'm being more specific here than just the average person online, right? Average person online, fine, go ahead. People that you care about, where the relationship is valuable, you have to make a judgment call about their openness to that level of discussion. Yes, I think some open-ended questions are interesting, and as long as they are not pointed. I have a vague familiarity with the street epistemology, like I haven't, studied it, but I've got the idea, right? Like, and ironically, it reminds me a tremendous amount about my training from Bible college. But I'll leave that there, right? The questions in street epistemology have a point they are making, right? And then a reasonably bright person is going to pick up on that point very, very quickly.
Sure.
And my point, and the thing I'm making is that person receptive? Then absolutely, that's the time to ask those questions, to give them the space to think through it, to answer honestly. if they're a relatively smart person and they recognize where you're going with this and they are resistant, piling on isn't going to help, right?
Sure.
That's the point that I'm trying to make.
Okay, that's a fair point, I think.
Yeah.
And I think though it is different with, like you say, people you care about, in as opposed to the internet stranger.
Right.
I definitely agree with you that the people you care about. I mean, I haven't talked to some of my family about, my newfound lack of belief, because I know that it's going to cause problems, and I just don't bring it up.
Right.
Which is kind of why I have the Twitter persona as kind of a mask, so to speak, or more of a filter.
Right.
I lost my train of thought with that, which is really frustrating because I was going somewhere with it.
No problem.
But yeah, I think that, like, when you go out and you're on, Facebook, Twitter, you see a post from, Answers in Genesis. I gotta say something. I can't not fight that, because they're putting out misinformation.
Yeah, can I just clarify? I am not talking about professional apologists.
Okay.
Right? I don't care about their feelings at all. I really am making the distinction between your run-of-the-mill believer, right, who might be online, who might think that it's their job to win the world to Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being just slightly more gentle with them, right? Ken Ham, or the professional apologists who are putting out what is patently false and easily refuted arguments, go for it. That's fine. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, that has ceased to be fun for me. That ceased at some point along the line. The futility of that process, occurred to me. Now that's just my personality, right? So I don't, if that's the thing that you like to do, you like to go after apologists, more power to you. Go for it.
It's funny you bring that up. I just had an apologist follow me on Twitter last night. I'm like, did he not look at all at my feed when he was doing this? Or but to kind of circle back to that, I think that ignoring the actual AIG tweet, the people inside that tweet who are on that side, I think it's okay to do not necessarily full jerk off mode, but maybe try some SE on them. Oh no, it's fine.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Do some SE with them and kind of get the conversation going. I mean, I had a long conversation with a guy in an Answer in Genesis thread that led to a whole blog post that we talked about a couple weeks ago.
Right.
Gosh, just a month or two ago now. But I think those can be more constructive conversations. I'm not going to have that conversation with my dad.
Right. And in no way, should you be asking me or care about my permission?
No, I'm just expressing points of view.
Yeah, I think those are valuable conversations, right? I would just say that the rarity of those, the fruitfulness of those conversations, is part of the decision-making process, right? Now, I know I follow a lot of people on Twitter who are more assertive atheists, right? Who make positive arguments often, and I don't have any problem with that, right? And I don't have any problem with what you're describing there at all. For me personally, it isn't of any particular. It isn't valuable, and let me give you one quick reason why. So one of the better apologists, and I'll put that in air quotes. I'm questioning whether I should name names or not, but one of the guys out there who interacts with a lot of the very smart people on Twitter is relatively generous to the atheist point of view, well, as far as treating us like human beings and not as evil devil worshippers, right? So he's doing almost everything you could ask for a Christian theist to do as far as the benefit of the doubt, and yet every interaction I watched with him and various other atheists was just painful to watch because it was spinning in circles. It was, and they were making credible, evidence-based, logic arguments that were, devastating to this particular apologist, right? But no matter what they did, the apologist just moved the goalpost. It's a constant, and now I'm thinking of 3 or 4 other apologists that I see often interacting with other atheists. And in all cases, they just move the goalpost. It doesn't matter that you have completely, from an objective point of view, that you've completely refuted their argument. That isn't going to get through to them. Yeah. Now, again, I'm not saying not to do that, because
it may not get through to them, but it might get through to somebody else who's reading that.
I agree. I totally agree.
And I think that that's kind of where I see things from is, like when we were Christians, you're planting seeds.
Yeah.
It to use their analogy. I think, and you may not convert or deconvert somebody in a conversation like that, but someone who's reading might go, I never thought of it that way. And they may go off and do their own research. And I think that, I think that's important for people to start looking at things from different points of view, as opposed to living in the bubble that they have.
Yes. Yeah. And to state the obvious, I have an online presence that's has atheist in the title. And if you read most of my blog, most of it is about why these ideas are wrong. So, in no way am I saying we shouldn't, make those arguments. And again, sometimes in public, it's about tone. It's about being selective when we exercise, the brute force of argument, right?
Sure. So I think maybe we have a different thought on what an anti-theist is.
Yeah, I was going to bring up that as well. I think we're going on a pretty loose definition. So so go ahead. What do you think?
I mean, for me, it's someone who actively opposes religion. That's kind of the simple definition, and what that looks like can take different forms. It doesn't have to be the in-your-face kind of person. It doesn't have to be a firebrand. Like Aaron Raw or Matt Dillahunty. It could be someone subtle. It doesn't. Right. I think I heard someone once say there's firebrands and diplomats, and you can be a diplomatic anti-theist.
Yeah. I agree. And by that definition, I'm an anti-theist, right? And I'm aware of that and I understand that. I believe in secularism, right? And I think the further we move towards secularism, the better. So in all those, those things, I agree. I guess what I'm poking kind of more at the cultural idea, the people who identify themselves as anti-theists.
Okay.
And my observation of them online, as a gross generalization, right? This is a stereotype, is not helpful, and that's the stance that I'm trying to take. So, yeah.
Well, I guess we don't have as much to argue about as I thought we would.
Yeah, but I think this is great to try to nail down terms and again, I think your description there I think is perfect. Firebrands and diplomats. I'm obviously on the diplomatic side. I have seen firebrands that deploy the strength of their intellect and argumentation with subtlety and grace, right? And that's wonderful. That's I'm very much behind that. Again, it's just the poor unprepared theist who may even be provocative, just unloading on that person. I just don't know if that is going to help them see, the errors in their thinking.
Yeah, well, when you do that kind of thing, it causes the backfire effect where
Precisely.
instead of being open to arguments, they just put up walls and la 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 la. I can't hear you. You're wrong. I'm right. End of story.
Yeah.
And I think that's more of a. Sorry, I'm playing with a twist tie because I don't know what to do with my hands. I think that's dang it. I shouldn't have said that because now I can't think of what I was saying.
No problem.
Yeah. So we'll drop that and I'll let you keep talking.
So I did want to point out that there are strains of atheism where if you aren't an aggressively anti-theistic person, that they see you as doing it wrong. Right. And it's it's really kind of that wing that I'm arguing against, if I'm arguing against it at all, right? It's just to say, in fact, a third element of the blog post, the Magic Feathers and Sugar Pills, is about if the goal is secularism, if the goal is bringing people out of religion, we better be providing better community and something to replace the magic feather with, right? So just yanking the feather out of people's hands.
That's not going to do much good.
Yeah. So I use the analogy of, obviously the analogy is with Dumbo, but it leads to crashes, right? So people crash when you take that forcibly out of their hands. And so, and one of the things that I point out is that, not everyone is like you and I, or like the typical atheist online where, we came to it through logic. We came to it through reading books. We came to it through reading other atheists online. In other words, it was a fairly intellectual pursuit, right? Mm-hmm. And the logic got to us, and we were forced to admit to ourselves that we were holding illogical beliefs, and that changed everything, right? But not everyone is a tech geek, intellectual, philosophy wannabe, I mean, and I'm joking, like, that's me, right? Like that's totally me, right?
Yeah.
But like, not everyone is like that. Other people are going to need more than that, more than just pure rational logic, right? They're going to need heart. They're going to need to know that you care about them, right?
Yeah.
The other argument that I make in the blog post is that we as a secular community better start doing better at building a community that will replace the former religious community that they've had and the emotional support that they received in their religious environment as well. Because when somebody goes through the deconversion process, not only have they lost all the people that they were in relationship with that go to church, they also have just lost what they think is their best friend.
Yeah.
Right? That God is suddenly gone.
Yeah, I definitely felt that pretty hard when I first deconverted. It was a vacuum for me. I had no one to talk to about it. I had nothing, and I got angry at the fact that this was all a lie, and now I have to bottle it all up because there's no one to talk to about it, and the people who I normally would talk to about it would want nothing to do with this conversation.
Right.
And yeah, they're I mean, you get to some bigger cities and they've got like pretty big groups of secular communities, but in smaller places there's literally nothing. You're lucky to find a Facebook group that's even within 25 miles of you.
Exactly.
So you have lost your physical, emotional, and relational support completely, and there's nothing to replace it. And I know somebody recently put out like a challenge, like what does religion offer that can't be replaced by secular means? That community aspect of it is a big part. Yeah, it could be replaced by secular means, but it hasn't.
Right. Precisely. And my argument is that the community itself is secular. Right? You know what I mean? It is the community itself. It's the people, the human beings, that make that valuable.
Right.
And it happens to be that they're organized around religion. But your point is well made. The hard part is that there isn't a welcoming, warm community available to everyone when they go through this deconversion process. So
yeah, and I think it's a bit harder to go to come to that, because I mean, with religion, you have this built-in kind of unifying force, and you don't necessarily have that in a secular arena.
Right.
I mean, when you go to church, at least where I am, it's, probably 80% all the same political party and all the same stances on all this other stuff. So you have so many mutual interests built into it already.
Right.
And I don't think that that's necessarily replicatable outside of that.
I understand. I do agree. And it's, it's been said many times before. It's like herding cats, right? We've got, you take very independent minded people who the only thing they share is a lack of belief in God.
Mm-hmm.
And that is hard to build a community around. So I actually think that's a good segue to talk about what we're doing here.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So I think, actually, let me follow on just really quickly. Part of the issue is that we try to slice up the secular community so much. Here are the anti-theists. Here are the SJWs. Here are the people who are formerly religious. Here are people who are never religious. There's 1,000 ways to slice this up, and that's why we don't have community. So, and we're kind of almost fighting each other. There's an opportunity, and I see it all the time online, to go after each other for very small differences.
Yeah.
And so in what way are we better than all of the sects and denominations of religion, right? So my point is, and here's the segue, I think what you and I are trying to do here is let's focus in really on deconversion, right? So obviously anybody's welcome to join us, but the target audience that we're trying to communicate to are those people who are in the last stages of doubt, those people who are in the process of admitting to themselves that they no longer believe, or they have completely acknowledged that and they are swimming around hopeless without anyone to talk to, just like you described. Mm-hmm. That's who we are reaching out to, and hopefully we can start to build some community around.
Yeah. What he said.
Well, that's probably a good point to wrap up, unless if you have anything else to say.
No, I think that was a good talk. I made a spring, so if anyone was wondering.
Very, very cool. Very cool. So if you are interested at all, if you are going through the deconversion process, if you've got questions, and in fact, I would offer this: if you're a theist and you've got questions, this is a safe place to hang out. We will not beat you up. I'll hold Chris in check. If you are deconverting, if you've been through the deconversion process, we want to engage with you. Contact us. You can direct message us at Godless Journey or at Graceful Atheist. The blog posts will be in the comments of this YouTube message. We've got emails. You can get through the blog. You can contact us. Is what I'm trying to get at. So
yeah.
And we'd like to have people participate in these secular hangouts so that it's not just Chris and I. We've got a few people that are saying they're interested. We just need to get the timing right, and we'll be doing that soon. So
we actually have some people in the live chat today.
Excellent.
God is not good, and Steve Bauman. I'm sure I'm butchering his last name. Oh, he's the rock guy. He's a geologist.
Excellent. All right. Thank you for everybody who is watching. That's fantastic.
Yes. So yeah, I think that's a wrap. And,
all right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great day.